Meeting will please come to order. If you would rise and give your attention to Councilman Nathan Schmidt for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I ask that we all take a moment of silence to reflect on the duties we're about to perform here tonight. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There are no proclamations, but there is one presentation. Pleased to have members of the Topeka Human Rights Commission here tonight as we recognize this year's honoree to receive the Troy Scroggins Award. Joining me is Jeremy Beer, the HRC Chair. Sometimes I have been told that speaking directly into this makes a difference. And we will be introducing Jeremy Beard, the winner of the Troy Scroggins Award this year, Joyce Grimsley, who chaired the Recognition Committee, and Maria Williams, who is the chair of the Human Relations Commission. The Troy Scroggins Award was named after Mr. Scroggins, its first honoree. His achievements in addressing discrimination and prejudice and advancing diversity set a high standard of how we should all treat one another. The Human Rights Commission Troy Scroggins Awards are presented to deserving individuals and organizations for their efforts in furthering the HRC's mission, which is to ensure fair and equal rights to all citizens of Topeka by ameliorating discrimination and prejudice based on race, sex, creed, religion, color, national origin, age, ancestry, disability, and sexual orientation, and advancing diversity in the city of Topeka. This year's honoree is Jeremy Beard, and let me tell a little bit about Jeremy. He mentors at-risk youth through the Asbury United Methodist Church Young Lions Mentoring Group. He is a member of the NAACP Economic Development Committee, the Topeka Justice Unity and Ministry Project, and the Brown versus Board of Education Planning Committee. So you are busy. And you give a lot of time, and you do service, and that's very valuable. I have here a presentation, which is Troy Scroggins Award presented to Jeremy Beard. The Human Relations Commission honors his service to Topeka in ameliorating the discrimination and prejudice with unwavering commitment and class, June 10th, 2014. Congratulations. And we have an award.
We also have this Troy Scroggins Award for Jeremy Beard for all his service that he's done.
Right there.
Okay. For the community, and this is your plaque. You're welcome. Oh, here you go.
I'd just like to say that I am very, very honored to receive this award, and more than anything, I am humbled by this award. I will use this as a motivation to continue doing work. I do understand that this man fought very hard to end discrimination in Topeka. I do understand that this man was an activist. I really believe in my life that I really have to do more than just soak up all the air and try to eat up everything, like while I'm here. You know, like we really have to work toward to make the world a better place. And I'm committed to justice and righteousness, and I really think that's really all our duty. So I thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well said. We have several other members of the Human Rights Commission, and Bill Breachy and Margot Rango here with us also.
the chair would call the roll.
Ms. Hiller? Here. Mr. Brown? Here. Ms. Ortiz? Here. Ms. Everhart? Here. Ms. De La Isla?
Here.
Mr. Mann, Speaker?
Here.
Ms. Schwartz? Here. Mr. Schmidt?
Here.
Mr. Harmon? Mayor Mayor Wolgass?
Here. Are there any corrections or additions to the agenda for this evening from the clerk? There are no additions, okay. Then we will proceed with the consent agenda. If the clerk would read.
A is denial of a tort claim filed by Chase and Dominguez requesting reimbursement in the amount of $1,865 for out-of-pocket medical expenses incurred on December 4th, 2013 in the parking lot of the Holiday Building. B is denial of a tort claim filed by Stephen Grims seeking damages in the amount of $30,000 due to damage incurred to the walls and foundation of claimant's home on September 30th, 2011. C is minutes of the regular meeting of June 3rd, 2014, and there are no applications this evening.
Thank you. You've heard the consent agenda. It is your pleasure. Mr. Schmidt moves to approve. Ms. Delisla seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Those opposed vote no.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the consent agenda is approved as read. We go to the action items. The first is an ordinance it's really a zoning ordinance.
A is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson amending the district map referred to and made a part of the zoning ordinances by Section 1850-050 of the Topeka Municipal Code by amending the Master Planned Unit Development Plan for Kansas Education and Science Park on property that is bounded by Interstate 70 on the north, Southwest McVicker on the east, Southwest Fraser on the west, and Southwest 6th Avenue on the south, to include a 2.14 acre property tract that is located at the southwest corner of Southwest Kansas Drive and Southwest McVicker Avenue into the PUD boundary area.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to ask Mr. Fyander to step forward. This is an ordinance that would allow the additional 2.14 acre tract of land to the existing PUD.
Mr. Viander.
Thank you, Your Honor, City Council, good evening. This is a proposal by Stormont Vale. They are building a new outpatient surgical orthopedic center and rehab center on the grounds of the Science and Education and Science Park. It's pretty simple. They just expanded their footprint to include some green space and some walking trails, and needed just to bring this into the PUD with the primary site. So this action really just includes all of their site and is consistent with a comprehensive plan. And we, Planning Commission staff, ask for a recommendation of approval and motion to approve the ordinance.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Fyander? Seeing none, thank you. Council members, Mr. Liesla moves to approve. Deputy Mayor seconds. Is any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the ordinance is approved. The second action item is a demolition request.
B is a demolition permit request for a 4-unit apartment building located at 715 Southwest 12th Street within the boundaries of the Holiday Park National Historic District in the city of Topeka, Shawnee County, Kansas, pursuant to Topeka Municipal Code Section 18255-030.
Thank you. City Manager.
Thank you, Your Honor. This would, as a request for approval to authorize the demolition of a structure at 715 Southwest 12th Street. It is a facility that has undergone significant deterioration, and the group, we're going to recommend that we demolish this, give approval to demolish this. Before I have Mr. Fyander speak on this and provide more information, answer any questions, I know that this is one of the most difficult things that we do, and it's a reflection of really not having a program in place very early on in the process to identify facilities that not even aren't at risk, but potentially at risk. And we continue to try to strive to establish a program, And I think while we're making progress, there are still buildings that are so far along, and this is one of them. We much rather would be talking about how we're going to rehabilitate this facility and address some of the issues. I don't think in this case we feel that that's a possibility. At this point, I would like to ask Mr. Fyander to present on this item.
Mr. Fyander.
Thank you again. Good evening. As was mentioned, I'll let you know kind of why this is before you from a historic preservation standpoint. I have, and then if there are any questions with code actions and code enforcement type specific issues, we have Captain Scott will also help out answering any questions. So to get you into this, the reason it's before you, this was actually initiated last September as a code enforcement case. It eventually ended up being a unsafe structure case and went through the process to administrative hearing and was ordered for demolition in February of this year. Obviously, the owner did not take actions to make the necessary repairs when that was done. Because this is in a historic district, National Historic District, that does need to have approval of the Landmarks Commission. If the Landmarks Commission finds it does not approve the demolition, then the applicant, in this case City of Topeka, code enforcement, would be able to appeal that, and that's why it's before you tonight. It's an appeal of the Landmarks Commission's decision. And not to complicate matters, but there's two different, Landmarks Commission has a different finding than you have. The Landmarks Commission just has to find that there was some negative impact to the integrity of the historic nature of the structure. It's a pretty high bar for an applicant to achieve it. Any demolition would probably meet that unless the entire structure had lost its historic integrity. So they voted to not approve the demolition because it did obviously impact the historic integrity of the structure. Your finding upon appeal is just that there has to be no feasible and prudent alternative to the demolition. To date, we have not had any proposals to staff to make the necessary repairs. No other potential owners have stepped forward. During the Landmarks Commission process, we did notify everybody in the historic district twice, all the owners. There was no opposition of the demolition, and actually there was one person came to the meeting to speak in favor of it. The long-term viability of this structure, if you can see, it's on a very small lot. There are no setbacks. There's no room for parking. So beyond its condition, if it was repaired, there's probably a reason the viability of this has suffered. We think there might be even more advantageous to be part of a adjacent lot, single-family lot, which I know the neighbors have expressed interest in. So in terms of your finding, we would recommend approval of the demolition and find that there is no prudent or feasible alternative at this time. I'll stand for questions on that matter and any code questions Captain Scott can help.
Okay. Has there been a cost on the demolition? Has that been determined, estimated? Because I know sometimes that factors into people's thinking on it.
At this time, Mayor,
Yeah,
Your Honor,
Mr.
staff,
no.
at this time, no. We haven't had an
Scott.
estimate on, yeah.
Okay.
We gotta get to the approval and then we'll move forward with the rest of the cost.
Okay.
Because we'll have to have an inspection done of the property for asbestos and everything like that, and that's a cost.
And also, the owner, I know, has paid taxes, so there's always a situation that when, after a building is demolished, the owner still owns the land. Has there been any discussion, or has he or she offered any interest or what they might do if it is demolished?
Mr. White has not been in contact with us since March. And he's, at that point, he asked for a hearing redo, and we did go to Judge Schwartz for that. And since that time, we haven't had any contact with him.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Other members of the council, I'm sorry, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to be very open on this item. We don't, at this particular time, have an identified source of funds to tear this facility down. So we may be looking for, really it's up to a year until we get into the next fiscal year prior to having some funds. We planned. We have one facility that is going to come in substantially higher because of some asbestos and other issues associated with it. So I actually had a conversation this afternoon with Councilmember Hiller pertaining to getting her input as to whether maybe she thought that this facility had a chance of being rehabilitated. If so, should we pull this off and not deal with this point, because we really don't have the funds at this point. So I just want to be open with you. We don't see a viable alternative in terms of demolition at this particular moment, but even if we're given the approval, we're going to continue to identify sources of funds, not necessarily for this building, but for the other ones, so that we have the rest of the funds available. If we were to identify those sources of funds, we'd be able to move faster, but at this point, we don't have that money.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it's close by. I know several of us have walked around it, and it is in a very bad state. And also, the location is where, certainly other people and high school students and whatever could be involved. Okay, Ms. Hiller?
Well, I just wanted to say via Captain Scott that I think personally and on behalf of the neighborhood appreciate the efforts that code compliance did go into it. This gentleman was given a number of opportunities. This has been going on for about 3 years. It's quite possible that even today it could be repaired, but it needs a lot of work. Part of the new system will be to help owners separate what to do on the outside to make sure it's just secure and looks good and maintained while taking their time on the inside perhaps. That will help with some of these kinds of situations in the future. Really appreciate then looking forward to a system that will address these earlier in a little better way. The neighborhood really did agonize about this. It is in a historic district, but some time ago, about 3 rounds ago, finally decided that if it came to this, that they would let it go. They would be willing to let it go, which is why I think people have not been appearing except for the gentleman that's right next door. So I would be willing, and everybody knows how hard this is for me, so we've really, really worked it. I've been in touch with the owner as well, who wanted to do some things, but did not follow through with me or with code even here toward the last minute. I'm not sure why, but he did not. So I would be willing whenever you're ready to make a motion. Move to find that there are no prudent or reasonable or feasible alternatives to the proposed demolition at this time, and that all reasonable planning to minimize harm to the surrounding historic district has occurred.
Okay, we have a motion. Ms. Del Isla seconds. And the other thing I also want to point out, the vote of the Landmarks Commission was 3-2, which shows that there is not a unanimous statement from the Landmarks Commission that opposed to the demolition. Is there any other discussion? If not, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 9 yes, Mr. Manspeaker voting no.
9 having voted yes, the demolition request is approved. We go to item C of the action items, the Economic and Community Development Committee, and I call on the Councilwoman Del Isla for the report from the committee.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try to be as brief as I can. The committee was established last year in the budget process as a means of facilitating the budgetary process and ensuring that all the agencies had a standardized method and a fair method of being able to receive allocations. We were very passionate about ensuring that new organizations were able to apply to the program, and furthermore, that the process was transparent, that it was simple, and that people had enough time to get their applications in with the expectation that the first year when we did the approvals, everybody received the same allocation that they had received at first the year prior, but that this year we were going to take a really deeper look. The way that the process worked was that once the criteria for the grants was approved, that criteria was brought to council. Council approved the criteria, and then based on that criteria, then questions were made. by the committee, and then staff executed the evaluation of these applications. Out of all of the applications that were received, we received from the budget department, we made a request of an amount, and that request was honored for grants to be allocated. And after evaluation of a committee of 5 staff members, we have received the scores. What happened was that we had scores that ranged everything from a 98% down to a 56%. And as we kept on working through the process, we wanted to ensure that those grants that worked extremely hard to ensure that they were meeting all the criteria, we put a lot of weight on outcome measurement, and that those organizations that were very successful then would receive the maximum capacity of funding. The difficult thing was that very much like we projected the year prior, some organizations did not receive funding. Staff was wonderful. I want to thank again Corey and Mr. Reed and the whole team that worked on the evaluation on the grants. And in front of you, you have a chart with the allocations that were awarded to the organization. I will say the staff alerted me, if you're going from the memo that is on your agenda, the numbers are incorrect. However, if you go to the 3rd page, which is the spreadsheet, this gives you the full allocation. For contracted services, $225,000 were awarded. For emergency aid services, we had 101,749. And finally, for counseling and prevention organizations, $305,250,000 were allocated for a total allocation of $631,999. At this point, I will say that the committee approved unanimously these amounts, and I stand for questions.
Okay, and the one you're referring to, is that the one with the weekly read? Is that?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay, just so we're all together on which sheet we're looking at. Are there questions for the chair of the committee, Ms. Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you explain to me Tier 1 and Tier 2?
The way that Tier 1 and Tier 2 were established was based on the scoring. We took the organizations, the top 16 organizations that had the highest score, and those were evaluated based on the merit, and then the money that was remaining from the first tier of grants that were submitted, then we had the second group, which was the lowest scoring grants. That's Tier 2.
Okay. And is the amount of funding, that's the total amount that we're going to give out? What if we get more money? How are we going to handle that? Was that discussed?
The way that we, thank you for, Mayor, may I answer the question?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. The way that we did the allocation was that we requested a total amount of money to begin. That way, it would make the process of budgeting a lot easier, because as a committee, we looked at the monies that we awarded the year before, we requested an increase, and then went ahead and made the allocation. What this does in turn is that it allows for the organization to continue the budgetary process without having to go with the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows. So we don't expect to request more money.
No, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
What I'm saying is, like the time before, we had this amount, and then we had more money come in, so then we had to come back and allocate more money. Because, are you gonna just leave it sit in that pot?
Could I call on the city manager?
Yes, City Manager.
Mayor and Councilmember De La Isla, I think what we're making reference to is the funds that came in on the transient guest
Right,
tax.
exactly.
In this case, we're talking about the city general fund grants and the CDBG grants.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
You're right.
Okay.
Okay. And then Deputy Mayor.
I can hold off if you want to recognize. I know we have some speakers.
Yeah.
I don't really have a question. I have a concern. I appreciate the hard work that the committee did, but it would concern me greatly to have the East Topeka Council on Aging completely cut with that senior program. I don't know what happened with why things went awry, but they have a long history of doing really good work. So I just was expressing my concern, but I know there's several conferees.
Okay, Ms. Ortiz had another question?
No,
Comment?
I just wanted to voice my concern with Denise. And also, I don't see a lot of Topeka youth in here, and that bothers me. And I just wanted to put that on the record.
Okay. So if, we will go to our conferees then. We have 4 persons who signed to speak on the issue. The first is Janet Shalansky. If you'll come up there to the podium, and you have 4 minutes, and you get lights up there as reminders. The
Okay.
white light comes on when you have 1 more minute, and the red
All
light
right.
comes on, you're over.
It's time for me to quit. Well, thank you very much for listening. I hope you all had the opportunity to review the memorandum that I distributed to all of you at the end of last week. We really value the process that the committee began with the grant applications to make them more objective. I think if you had the opportunity to read the memo, you understand that one of our concerns was that when we started the process, we had a scoring sheet, and if you look at the memo we gave, that was attachment 1, which had broad outcomes. By the end of the process, we were giving an expanded scoring sheet that told you, for example, in board leadership, you'd get 5 points if you did this and 3 if that. That information was not known to us up front. We had difficulty, I think, trying to choose what to fit in the application. Again, I think from Ms. Vega, Ms. Wright, and their staff have been very, very helpful, and you may know that they've already had a meeting with all of us to explain in more detail and ask input to make the system better. And one of the things that was pretty universal, I thought, in hearing them, was that the application this year had limited space. In order to list your outcomes, you had a little tiny column. And our executive director just happens to be a retired PhD, and she chose, and obviously incorrectly, because we got 0 out of 20 points on outcomes. Again, that limited space was difficult if you were multi-service agents. If you only did one thing, it was a little better than trying to choose, what we did do. But again, I appreciate the process that they went through. I think that scoring sheet, and particularly with that expanded scoring sheet that talks about what's going to be funded. I don't think I need to tell any of you or spend much time talking about the needs of the people we serve at the East Topeka Senior Center, whether it's giving them the nutritious meal they get, whether it's transportation for dialysis, cancer treatments, or regular doctor's appointment. The other thing that I wanted to share with you, East Topeka Senior Center was about to go under a couple years ago. We had some strong leadership. Connie Hubble, former board, was here. We had Mrs. Kerr, Mary Kerr, who did not take any salary to be executive director. We've spent a lot of time doing fundraising. Our fundraising this year will be in excess of $40,000. You may also know that there's a lot of community members, junior league sustainers and regular junior league members, who believe enough in what we're doing that they're spending Tuesdays and Wednesdays getting ready for the next to new sale. We've also applied for some grants this year. We just got one from Capital Federal. We just got another one from the Kansas Health Foundation to work on a single dispatch for all the senior centers. And I know that you have wanted us to coordinate better, but I can tell you with this loss and the loss of the money from the county, particularly if we have to move out of Rice Community Center, we may have to close our doors. We've about maximized the fundraising that we can do. Again, I value the point system, but I do think that in this transition year, without the expanded opportunity, it was very, very difficult for us to do that. And again, we got 60 points out of 100. Obviously, we didn't choose right in filling in the boxes on the grant. I think the process is good. The expanded scoring sheet would have helped us significantly. There was no appeal process, so that's why we're here to the City Council to look at what, if all, can be done, because it's important, I think, to continue to provide services to East Topeka.
Thank you. Would you state your position?
I'm sorry, I'm chairman of the board of the East Topeka Senior Center.
All right, thank you.
And I think, Mr. Mayor, that Connie signed up only in case I couldn't come. My daughter's getting married on Saturday, and I don't have a crisis right now, so I'm here. So Connie does not want to speak today. And also
okay.
Jane Metzger, our past chair, many of you know she's got a very serious illness in her family, but would have wanted to be here too. She's worked very hard to keep our doors open.
All right, thank you. Are there, Mr. Harmon?
Thank you, Your Honor. What's the total budget of the East Topeka Senior
Oh,
Center?
around 180,000,
Okay, for 2014.
yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Are there other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Connie Hubble has the opportunity to speak, but chooses not to. Next is Joni Underwood.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and City Council members. I'm Joan Underwood, and I'm Vice President of the Marion Clinic Board of Directors. It's my understanding, and I'm really kind of late into this process, so bear with me, that, as Michelle talked about, the city initiated a new process to award services and agency grants. We really commend and support the city in doing this, and especially at looking at ways and outcome measurements and that. Saying that, we're also in agreement with Janet Shalansky's comments and encourage the council to consider a year of transition and to reassess the decisions, especially for us agencies that have relied on these funds in previous years and are not receiving any this year. The Marion Clinic has worked diligently with the Safety Net Task Force here in the city, which has been a planning committee to determine the best way to serve those without insurance and underserved. 18.3% of the adult population in our community are uninsured and in need of health services. Marion Clinic is the only free clinic in the city. We would hope that during this period of collaboration with both hospitals, the mental health centers, health department, that special consideration would be given that this collaboration is occurring so that we can become more effective and efficient within our community to provide health care services. I thank you for your time and urge you to consider transition funds during this year.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much. Fourth person is Joseph Ledbetter.
Evening, council members. I was a little bit disturbed in looking at this attachment that you completely cut the Marion Clinic out. They've been here long-term. They've served a lot of poor that do not have health insurance, unlike state employees and other government employees and private sector employees. There's a vast need in this community for their services. And I doubt very seriously that they're paying themselves excessive salaries for management, unlike some of the nonprofits that I'm going to discuss in public comments now that I have their 990s, including Go Topeka. I think it's interesting that we talked about a transparent process, competition, outcome measurements. And I'm not going to question that because I wasn't part of that process. I don't see the same level of scrutiny attached to economic development. And it is relevant because a lot of these people could have jobs if we had better programs for economic development and hadn't lost so many jobs in the last few years. Poverty is up 50% in the last 10 years, according to the U.S. Census. So these needs are real. They're very real. Most of the agencies that applied for money are very good. They're not paying themselves excessive salaries. And I'm glad to see a lot of them are funded, at least to some level. But I think you need to reconsider completely cutting out the Marion Clinic. And I'm not trying to play favorites here. They all deserve some level of funding, I'm sure. But that's shocking to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, council members, we do not have a motion at this point. Mrs. Ortiz?
Does the youth court, don't they get money from fines or something? Or is this part of, another part of what we give them? Because I thought they got so much money. Richard, do you remember?
You're talking youth court, Topeka Youth Project,
Right.
youth court.
Don't they get, do you know?
Mr. Harmon?
I think you're referring to the drug court, aren't you? Is it the Jared Harson administers? That's the-
No, I thought it was the youth court that we gave so much money, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, sure.
Have dialogue.
Drug and alcohol.
I thought so much of that came from our court fees.
I'm not-
That I don't recall.
I do not, I know, they were here and we recognized them within so many months ago. And because I know they hear first-time offenses for teens.
Right.
First-time traffic offenses. I don't know, I don't know the answer to that, if they have, what their other funding sources are. Yeah, if, Mr. City Manager?
I believe that Judge Miller could maybe
Okay,
add some.
thank you.
on that subject.
Is the question, does the youth court get court fees,
Court funding?
court funding? No, not to my knowledge.
I could almost thought that they did, but okay.
You want to argue about it?
We can.
But they do,
I think Corey's coming up.
I think they do handle first offenses of teenagers.
Well, the youth court is not part of municipal court.
I know,
Right.
I know it is not, but I understood that through the
But-
Topeka
but-
Youth Project.
Young people that are eligible can apply to youth court through the prosecutor's office.
Okay,
But
okay, thank you, that's
they
helpful.
get no
Yeah,
court funding.
No funding, yes, thank you.
So-
We're Going around,
believe,
Ms. Wright, yes.
If we didn't like that answer, we're going to try another one.
Yes, I like that.
I do believe, Councilmember, you're referring to the special alcohol and drug.
Is that where they
Yes.
get funding, so much funding from there?
Yes.
Okay, I knew it was somewhere, okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Corey.
I think, to your knowledge, does the Topeka Youth Project, Youth Court receive other funding? Do you, and that's an unfair question in a sense, I don't
Yeah.
expect you to know all that, but
Yeah, I'm
just
sorry,
by
don't-
chance if you do.
Don't have that with me, no.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor Everhart.
Thank you. I guess I do understand the difficulty that you know, a first-time process going through is, but when I look at, I'm not gonna be able to support this. When I look through this list, not to make any comparisons, and, because I wasn't part of the committee, don't know what you looked at, but for an example, Positive Connections, which does medical assistance, had a 2014 allocation of $12,200 and, well, almost $300, and they went to this year almost $37,000. Not that we have enough money to go to any of these programs. And then we completely cut the Marion Clinic and East Topeka Council on Aging, who, that increase alone would have paid for us. So I guess I just can't support this in this fashion, and like I said, I do understand I wasn't on the committee, and I know y'all worked really hard, but that really concerns me, those two programs being cut.
Okay, and so if there is a interest in reviewing this, we have to look at a process to do that, and I'm not, but you don't have to answer that, but I'll call on you, recognize you, Ms. Elisa.
Thank you, Mayor. What I would implore the body to remember is that when the committee was selected because there was a lot of concern and there was a desire to have a group of people sit down and establish policy that would make it equitable and transparent for all the organizations to apply for these funds. Now, one of the things that we're trying to get away from is if we try to look at the fact that a committee worked and the votes were unanimous, is because there was an understanding. Nobody in the committee wanted to remove money. Nobody in the committee did not give money to an organization. The organizations did not perform in their grant process. As a grant writer myself, I can tell you that, the Bank of America grant does not let you write more than 1,000 characters. You have to deal with what a grantor gives you as the criteria. And what I want to encourage the committee and the whole council to understand is that this was looked at with a lot of scrutiny, and the staff put a lot of work. We went grant by grant at the moment of evaluation, and discuss why each grant received the score that they received. So I would implore the board to keep that in consideration as.
And there are other members of the committee, if you wish to speak. Mr. Schmidt.
Yes, thank you,
As
Mayor.
is a committee member.
I am also a committee member. I wanted to address a couple of accusations that were made in the public comments. I am 100% in favor of transparency and in favor of the public being critical of transparency. We had 6 hours of hearings, public hearings that were recorded, broadcast live on television. I think they were live. They may not have been live, but they were at least on television. They were all recorded. All of the social services, or at least the vast majority of the social services, attended every one of those meetings for all 6 hours. Nobody was denied because of excessive salaries. We went through every question on every application in 3-inch tall binders over a 6-hour period and looked at these. The point of doing that and the process that we came up with last year, the reason we did this is so that we wouldn't come down to the budget process and have exactly what occurred in the past, where we don't have people who have sat through 6 hours of these processes, and we don't have the staff that put in many more hours than that looked at all of these applications, defining, who deserves what. We wanted the people that were the most informed, that were the most educated to make those decisions. We then spent considerable amount of time reviewing those decisions to bring that to the council so that we didn't have the situation where all of these groups do great work. Throughout the city, without exception, every one of them does great work, but we can't fund them all. And we would love to. If anybody wants to make a motion to fund all of them at fully requested amounts, I would be happy to consider that. We would love to be able to do that, but we can't. We came up with an amount, we came up with a process, and all of these organizations submitted to that process. They worked through that process, and it was rough. And we made some allocations for the fact that this was a transition period. We did that, but these are the scores that they earned based on what was presented to them. And it's not fair to the organizations that did well, that were able to score well on this application process, to allow emotions to cloud that process. The reason we went with this process is so that this doesn't become a political gotcha game on television. We went through that process so that they were evaluated on outcomes, not outputs, and on the merit. And that is why I would support and would encourage this council to support adopting these allocations. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple questions as to the process of, and I commend the committee and getting a rating going on grants, because I've applied for many grants, and if you have something that you can use that you're going to get scored on, that's really great. Being a first year, though, that this is happening, and looking at the differences that we've had, I know we also looked into the idea that we based a lot of our allocations on previous years, and yet I look at this and I see there are 6 that have received not only the positive connections, but others, Community Action Project, the Breakthrough House, the TDC Full Care, the TDC Parent Child, and the LULAC have all received more funding than they received in 2014. And so if you look at the idea that we're trying to base allocations on what we previously have done, and yet we're giving much more to that. So my question is to the city manager, because I know that we are trying to avoid hassling over this in our budget meetings like we did last year. So if we sent this back to committee and had an appeal process added to it, to look at those entities that did not get a dime and they put their efforts into applying for it, if there could be an appeal process, and if the budget process, I mean, a lot of times we don't even know exactly yet what we're going to have for that 2015. So what is the outcome if we stall this and send it back to committee and say that we want you to relook at the numbers and some type of an appeal process for those that did not receive anything?
Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Schwartz. The first thing is we didn't do this so that it didn't interfere with the budget process. We understand that that's part of the budget process. We did this because there was a significant amount of unrest within this body as to the process that we were using last year, and it was introduced and carried forward as a concept to let's do this in a more objective way that we can identify and get into a deeper level. So that's the first question. The second part of that, I certainly can defer to the city attorney, but I'll tell you what I'll say. This can go back to the committee if this body so chose to do so, and there could be a discussion pertaining to establishing some sort of appeal process. So legally, you certainly can do that. And was there another question?
I think that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Elisla?
Few comments. I've heard 3 times, this is the first year. This is not the first year. This is the second year. First year, we made exceptions and we granted all the organizations the same amount of money that they received. This is year 2 of the process, not year 1. Year 1, we were lenient. We told the organizations there's going to be cuts. We understand that there's going to be cuts. Please prepare your budgets. So let's go ahead and go with the process. This is going to be year 1. Second comment, again, I was taking notes with regards to the comments that were brought forth. There was a comment that stated that information was not known up front. The staff was available constantly to have questions asked. If somebody didn't understand how to fill out the grant, the staff was there. Not only that, but furthermore, subsequently, after the application process was completed, there was a workshop. Am I correct? And all of the organizations that were interested in participating and providing feedback did that. And again, I commend the staff on the spectacular work that they did on ensuring that everybody understood this. Third, organizations that received more money were because they showed 30 points out of 100 points were based on outcome measurement. Organizations that provided evidence that they were able to meet the outcomes that they told the city that they would achieve were then given the opportunity to receive more funds so that they can provide more services. Organizations that were not able to provide evidence that they were able to meet the basic goals that they said that they would achieve are the organizations that you see here in the predicament that we see today. I would find it extremely disturbing if, as a body, we would look at an application that has said that they have not been able to meet the goals from a prior year and that we would give them more money or fund them above organizations that have proven and have track record of success. So again, I know that we're looking at names of organizations. We all love what all of these organizations are doing. These are some very tough decisions, but these were decisions that were made with ample announcement, ample support from the staff, and they were made with a lot of consideration.
Councilman Schmidt?
I just wanted to clarify one thing that was mentioned. We did not go into this with the idea of allocating based on what they had received in the past. That was actually something that we were charged not to do, because that has been the tendency of the council over the last several years, is to get down to budget night and just basically say, throw out everything that was recommended and we'll just fund them at the same level they were last year. That's been done numerous times, and that creates a precedent where programs that maybe need more funding or need less funding just apply for the same amount of money, because that's what they know they're going to get. And if you look at the scoring sheet, the scope of the project is measurable. So when they apply for something, You know, they have to justify the cost. That's part of the criteria that is measured. So if they apply for more money, you know, that is measured in the scoring outcome. So I just wanted to clarify that point. Thank you.
Okay, council, we do not have a motion. I think we need to be circling in on one here before too long. Ms. Hiller?
Let me take a stab at it. One thing to point out too was that the idea in what was eventually the council adopted set of procedures, and the concept was, as Councilman Schmidt and Councilwoman De La Isla said, to have an objective process that was based on performance and outcomes and being able to document those. Just so people know, the staff not only looked at the applications, but they went back and looked at the progress reports that had been turned in and made sure that they matched and that the outcomes really were reached, which was something they had done in the past and it had been ignored by the council. And as the council decided to make this a more objective process, the staff really did work hard and do that. Is it perfect? No, this committee has decided to get back and review once the process is over. The step-by-step in the calendar that this body adopted was that the committee would be charged with working with staff and doing an allocation process and getting that completed in a perfect world in May, and would present recommendations to this council by June 1, or sometime around June 1. The thought then was that, and correct me if you disagree, that way the council could see, the council would have done a recommended social services allocation, one big number, and we did do that back in February, so that there was a number to work from for that allocations process. The committee would go through the process with the agencies of doing, in effect, a tentative allocation based on the agreed priorities and procedures, which this committee did do. The idea then was that the council would then know how, if that number was approved in the final budget, how it would be allocated. That the final approval of those budget amounts would occur once the budget was done, so that if for some reason there was less money or people decided to add more money, the thought was if the allocations matched the original number, that would be the final number and would be approved. If there was a change, less money or more money, those allocations would be sent back to the committee to amend the allocation recommendation for final approval. So just as a refresher on what the process would be, there was an interest with the way this was proposed tonight to actually adopt the allocations right now. That might be, I would argue that's premature. I understand why, however, locking the allocations now made some sense. I would propose then, on the issue of the allocations, as well as this appeal issue, which we did talk about, would be a motion that would say that the council adopt the allocations with regards to the recipients identified in the report, total amount allocated contingent upon the outcome of the budget process. So if we change it, it would change. And to direct all appeals to the ECD committee.
Okay, that is your motion.
That is my motion.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Schwartz seconds. Mr. Schmidt?
Is that offered as I don't think we can do that. I think we have to offer the motion and then offer that as a substitute motion, because there's been no motion made to adopt these recommendations first. I just want to make sure we get this legally correct. I would move to adopt it, and then you can offer your substitute motion.
If that's the way it needs to be, this was not perfectly clear.
It was, as I understand it, there's a recommendation coming out of the committee. It has to be discharged to council, and that recommendation has to be considered by council, and then there could be a substitute motion offered.
Okay, well, typically, the report was received by the council received the report from the committee. And what you're saying is then we need to adopt, I mean, sometimes we don't adopt the committee, we don't take
Correct.
action to approve a committee report.
Right, but I'm sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead.
No, I may have missed it, but I hadn't heard that it had been accepted by, the committee report had been accepted.
Okay, typically, well, it is accepted, I think. We don't necessarily vote to accept a report It isn't necessary, I was told it wasn't necessary to
No,
vote to
not-
approve the report.
No, not to vote to approve the report, but typically there's an acceptance of the report by the body.
Okay. You mean as a motion?
Yes.
Okay, now but that's in, I was told differently about a couple months ago that we don't have to vote to accept a committee report. It is presented and it is accepted, but we certainly can do that. Mr. Harmon, are you going to help us in this?
I'm going to try.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would move adoption of the committee report.
Okay, there was not a second for Mrs. Hillers, so we'll say that
There
that
was,
motion is
actually,
on
but-
hold. I'm sorry, there was.
If you
Mrs.
wanna
Schwartz,
start
but
over,
we will
that's
say that
okay.
this is the ruling is that we will have a motion to approve the allocations as came out of the committee.
That was not my motion.
Okay, would you repeat your motion?
My motion was to adopt the committee report. And is that different, Mr. City Attorney, is that different from moving the allocations to
Yes.
adopt the committee report?
Yes.
It is different.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So I'm moving adoption of the committee report. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, then there would be a subsequent motion to approve the allocations.
Yes, Councilman.
At which time there could be substitute motions.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. See, that helped.
Well, the committee report is to recommend to the full council approval of the following allocations. So I don't see how we can adopt the committee report and not say we're adopting the allocations. The committee report is adopting the allocations. And I don't understand how we can do that. Adopt the committee report and not adopt the allocations.
Okay.
I'm ruling that by this committee, by this motion, I'm reading from the committee's report, and it says, motion by Councilman Nathan Schmidt, second by Councilmember Karen Hiller, to recommend to the full council approval of the following allocations totaling $631,999. If we move to accept the committee's report, we are accepting those allocations.
Well, you made the ruling that by approving Councilman Harmon's motion, you're approving the allocations?
Yes.
Okay.
And there was a second.
No.
Seeing no second, the committee is, the motion dies. Mr. Schmidt.
I'm going to try to, I think this is the way that this should be done. I'm going to make a motion to approve the allocations as recommended by the committee. Now, I believe if that motion is seconded, then we can have substitute motions on top of that motion, correct?
Yes, Councilman.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're moving to accept the allocations as recommended by the committee. Ms. Del Isla seconds. Is there discussion? Mrs. Hiller.
I would make a substitute motion in this case to adopt the allocations with regard to the recipients identified in the report, the total amount allocated contingent upon the outcome of the budget process, and to direct all appeals to the ECB committee.
Okay, and Mrs. Schwartz seconds. Not reluctantly, but hesitantly. All right, Mrs. Deputy Mayor.
Well, I don't have a problem with that in the sense that it sets up an appeal process, but I guess my question would be, if we adopt the amounts, what good is the appeal? I mean, because if you go back and set up an appeals process, we've already allocated all the dollars.
Mrs. Hiller, do you want to
So,
respond?
that would be my concern, because your motion included both, adopting the allocations and then setting up the appeal process. So, I mean, if you had just said to send it back to committee, and establish an appeal process, I'd be on board, but I don't know how you do that. In other words, you could hear the appeals, but you wouldn't have the authority to grant anything.
Ms. Hiller.
I'll tell you why I did it, and you know, we're feeling our way with this process. If the idea was to set up a process and that the council's involvement was to set up the criteria and the procedures and let the staff and the committee do the work, and then if we don't let that happen, as I think Councilwoman De La Isla said, we'll be back where we were where this entire body as a whole will read all the applications, get the letters and calls from everybody, and will make the decisions as was happening before. And I'm feeling my way too with it, but what we agreed, as I understood it, was to basically put that to the committee and let them do the work. Because if the council as a whole even pulls out one or two at a time for whatever reason, as someone stated earlier, it kind of cuts the legs out from under the entire process. So what would happen by referring the appeals back to the committee would be that the committee would hear more detail about why it was that particular agency wanted a change. There would not be any additional dollars available in the allocation that was there. So it would, at minimum, be a learning process for the agency and for the committee for the future process. If there was a sense on the part of the committee to add dollars, it would at least come out of the committee with the context of all of their considerations rather than as a standalone consideration by the council.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
And I really appreciate that explanation, and while I certainly agree that it's the committee that should set up the appeal process and look at these issues as opposed to the full council, I think if it were just being referred back to committee to establish an appeal process without the approval of the allocations, I would be on board with that, but I'm not gonna.
Okay with that.
Yeah, I can't support it this way, just because I think that, you know, it's great, but I want to know that if it goes back and there's an appeal process, that there is the ability for the committee to make adjustments if needed. So I'm not gonna support the motion as it is, but I appreciate the explanation, thank you.
Is there other discussion on substitute motion? Mr. Schwartz?
I also am not going to support it. Working in aging for so many years and also working with Connie and Janet and Joni, I think the East Topeka Center should get some kind of funding, and I think there should be an appeal process for this year, not for future. So, thank you.
Is there other discussion? Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Mrs. Schwartz. I am in admiration of the work of the committee. I'm in admiration of the work of the staff. I'm coming in behind it. I haven't even had a chance to view all the work yet. At least 6 hours worth. I understand the committee met, and I can't imagine the staff hours involved. I do have a problem, though, with, and I understand there was a year, there was warning. I understand all of that. I guess, and I don't know how we get there, but I would like to see a floor to this process this year, if we could do that, where there's a reduction in funding for those that fall below this line, but not a total stoppage of funding. So is that something you would care to comment on as any of the committee members?
Mr. Schmidt?
That was considered. We went through several models on the allocation. Some of those models included funding everyone initially, and one of the modifications that we made at the committee level was initially we decided that we weren't going to fund anything under $10,000. Just because with all the staff time involved, all of the time involved putting the application together, those kinds of things aren't really that viable. We relaxed that rule for this year specifically because of the reason, specifically because they were going through this process and it was a new process and we wanted to get everybody involved. So that was taken into account. So there would be a floor in that sense. We also looked at funding everybody. It got to the point where we could do that, but you really are, in order to do that, what you're doing is you're taking significant chunks of money from the highest performing. We tried to do it in several different ways. The way we came up with by creating the 2 tiers, we established a level of performance on the scoring system, and we funded those those at a higher level, and the ones below that, we funded at a lower level until we ran out of money, and that's where we came. Not addressing that point, but on a different point, I would encourage members who are opposed to this process, and this process involved 6 hours of just committee work and dozens of hours by the council to offer counter proposals. This is the problem, and this is the reason that we started this process. It's easy to say, I want to fund everybody. It's really hard to fund everybody. And so offering to send it back to do more of what we've already spent dozens of hours on, I don't think is responsible. If the process is not working, I would ask that members provide guidance to the council or to the committee of how you want us to spend that money. Because this is how the committee and staff came up with the money that we're spending. And we spent numerous hours doing it. So I would be happy to go back and reconsider it. But if the point is just to say a name and send it back to committee, then I don't think we're going to get anywhere. I think we need, if that's the way we want to do it, if we want to do this, where council members are out here publicly advocating for specific applications, then please offer those applications back to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a substitute motion before us. Is there other discussion on the substitute motion? Seeing none, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
We have 3 yes and 6 no.
6 having voted no, the substitute motion does not pass, so we are on the original motion, which is to approve the allocations in the form that came from the committee. Is there any other discussion on that, on the motion? Mrs. Hiller?
With our new rules, is it possible at this juncture to refer it to committee, or do we have to vote on this motion?
No, that motion is acceptable.
Yeah, there could be another motion at this point.
Yeah, it would be another. No other discussion. All those in favor of the motion vote yes. Those opposed vote no.
This is the motion to approve the allocation. Okay. We have 4 yes and 5 no.
5 having voted no, the ordinance does, or it is not an ordinance, it is a motion. And to allocate these funds. The fact it did not pass, then I would assume we would revisit this, perhaps through the committee. We'll look to the city manager to provide guidance and suggestion on.
Mayor, excuse me.
I'm sorry.
I didn't understand what the motion was, so I voted wrong. My vote was yes, even though it's not gonna make a difference, but my vote is yes.
All right. We let people correct if they feel they were misunderstood. It was a vote of 4.
It would have been 5-5.
It would make it still 5-5, and it would not pass. No, I'm not voting, there's only 9 votes.
Okay, I was looking.
So she would, that's the last motion. So if she
Oh,
voted,
okay.
these are yeses. I'm
No,
sorry.
it's 4-5.
Okay.
So if she
Yeah.
voted yes, it would change the
Yes,
vote.
you're correct. If she voted yes, it would change it. It would have passed.
Make a motion to
It would,
reconsider.
someone would.
Thank you.
Motion to reconsider my vote.
Yes.
And Ms. Delisla moves and Mr. Brown seconds to reconsider the vote. All those in favor of the reconsideration of the vote, vote yes, opposed, vote no.
We have 7 yes and 2 no.
7 having voted yes, we will revote.
Can we have a restatement of what we're voting on, please, Mr. Mayor?
Would the clerk want to read we have a motion to approve the allocations as they came from the committee.
Yes.
Is that basically what it is? we're voting to approve the allocations recommendations
recommended by
as
the
on this
committee.
page, the 2015 allocations for the contracted at the social service recommendations. Discussion? Yes, Deputy Mayor Everhart.
Thank you. I'd like to make a substitute motion, if that's in order, to refer it back to the committee to establish an appeals process and then at a later time, look at the allocations.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to refer this to the committee with the
Point
purpose
of
of
order.
establishing, I'm just repeating it, establishing a hearing, appeal process, and then bring them back to the committee, to the council. Did I state that correctly?
You can read it back.
Substitute motion to refer back to committee to establish appeal process and at later time to look at allocations.
All right. Okay, open for discussion. Councilman Schmidt?
I'm a little lost on this because we just made a motion that passed to revote. And now we're offering a substitute motion, which would invalidate that motion that just passed.
You have to, there was a vote to reconsider the vote, and so you do have to vote on the original motion to approve the allocations, because there was no substitute motion made prior to the vote.
Correct.
Does that
So
make
we have to
sense?
vote on my motion
Right.
to approve the allocations before we can,
And if that fails, then there could be a substitute motion.
correct. Thank you. That's what I thought.
So, in a sense, what you're suggesting, we rule the motion out of order.
Yeah,
by the
because
deputy
there was
mayor.
never a vote, well, there was a vote, but then that vote was reconsidered, so we have to have,
We do have, we
a
have to,
vote.
right now, we have to have the new vote.
Right.
To revote. All right, and probably on that, there would not be discussion. I see none. Okay, we are voting on the original motion, which was to approve the allocations. All those in
Mayor.
favor vote yes. Excuse me, Mrs. Silver.
I do have a question, thank
All
you.
right.
Since we're back on it. In our typical allocations budget process, we
Oh,
meet,
excuse me, is this debatable?
it's, no, because you would call the vote, debate had ended, so it's just the vote.
I
on
think
Councilman
we
Schmidt's
vote
motion.
at this point.
Yes.
On the original motion. All those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no. We're voting on the allocations as they came from the committee.
We have 4 yes and 5 no.
Okay, 4 having voted yes, that is not needs 5, so the motion is defeated. Is there other action on this item?
can I ask where we are with this?
Well, the
We've-
motion, we have not approved the allocations from the committee.
But back to what the original adopted process, if we don't need to actually formally receive a report from the committee, then in fact, the committee has duly delivered its recommendations by June 1. The council knows what they are, and then we will finish out the process per that original calendar, correct?
I would think the
Yes.
city manager
Okay.
would work on that. I mean, we have a set amount that will go in the budget. We've agreed on that.
Well-
And then, but the allocations is something we have not agreed on. At some point, we'll have to reconsider that. Mrs. Everhart?
I guess then whether it's a comment or a question, so if it's not sent back to committee to establish the appeals process, then it's the full council, either at some point in time or budget, that has to establish that. I thought it was preferable for the committee to establish the appeals process, which is why I was trying to send it back to the committee. And I would now can I make that motion to send it back to committee to establish the appeals process?
I don't
Or
believe
to
so, it's
request
died
the-
at this point. It's
Okay.
dead.
Okay, if there's no further comment, we will go to to the next item on the agenda. We'll do the transient guest tax committee report, and on that, I call on Councilwoman Schwartz for the committee's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and hopefully this won't be as controversial. The Transient Guest Tax Committee met, and we discussed the actuals and the budget and the projected, and then the 2015 budget. And as you can see on the agenda, the projected revenues are $2.3 million. Visit Topeka would receive $1,312,054. Visit Topeka Bid Fund would receive $175,000. Sunflower Soccer would receive $333,791. The Great Overland Station would receive $94,000. The Riverfront Park would receive $106,000, and the Historic Preservation Fund would receive $149,438. And the zoo would receive a transfer of $200,000. So with these allocations, I would move the adoption of these allocations.
The allocations, as the committee has recommended, has been motion to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Harmon seconds. I have one question. On the sheet, there is a contingency this year that we haven't had in previous years. Would you want to speak to that?
Well, I'll probably ask Doug to answer that, but we have not allocated any of these funds for, 2 years from the transient guest? Oh, that was the Historic Preservation Fund. So that wasn't done for 2 years. So there was a buildup of some funding, but Doug, please explain.
Mr. Gerber.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Schwartz, the intent with the contingency fund is, obviously, we're not entirely clear on what revenues will be throughout the year. So the intent is that the contingency will give us a cushion if we bring in additional funds so that we can spend the balance to zero, which we feel is more appropriate than having a fund carryover.
Okay. In the past, we have sometimes done that in the first quarter of the next year when we make budget amendments. You know, at the end of the year, or usually not until February when we know when the money is all in for the previous year. But this would be, so it's just a new way of handling it, is that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all right. When I see this year, we had a very large carryover, 400,000. You want to speak to that?
If there's a question in that, Mr. Mayor, part of that is due to the fact that we collected for the soccer, the 1% on the soccer complex, but did not allocate it in the previous year. And so that's why if you notice in the FY14 projected budget, that jumps.
Yes, that was my next question.
Yes.
All right, why we had that large increase. Mrs. Ortiz?
And how much money do we give to the Sunflower Soccer? There was a percentage in there that we agreed.
Yeah, it's 1%. We increased the transit guest tax from 6% to 7%, and that one additional cent goes towards the soccer funding, soccer field funding.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Does the 333, does this number reflect that 1%? Is that what that is?
Yes, Councilwoman Ortiz.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Mrs. Hiller?
Well, I support the contingency amount if I understood it correctly when I heard about it and looked at the minutes. If people who've been on the council or watching remember, sometimes our estimate for how much we were gonna bring in was a little bit high. And in the fourth quarter, the grantees got cut and weren't expecting that. And I personally like the idea of leaving the contingency in there so that if there's extra or something that can be carried over to a future year, I prefer that way of budgeting something like this that's a little unpredictable than to having to cut people at the end of their fiscal years.
I think the only year we cut is when the recession occurred and and it went down a great deal. With the contingency, when would that decision be made? Is there at the end of the year or February of next year, when we know how much money would we be receiving?
Mr. Mayor, our intent is to try to do this on an actual basis as opposed to previously it's been done based on a budgeted basis, so we divide it up into 4 quarters, and as Councilwoman Hiller mentioned, then that sometimes got us into issues at the end of the year. So the intent would be to look at that then at the end of the year and try to true that up.
So then the agencies or these organizations would apply for that, for additional funding? Or it'd be up to the committee to determine how the expenditure?
No, there wouldn't be any application. We would just give them the exact amount. The contingency is just in there so that we can spend the fund down to 0 and don't carry any balance forward.
Okay. So, I guess I don't, see, I think what my question is, for instance, Visit Topeka is in the budget for 1.3 million, and they will be receiving that on a regular basis. Now, do we have to use a contingency to fund that?
No, we do not, no.
So how do we spend the contingency?
Our intent is to fund, I'm not stating this clearly, I don't think, but the intent is to fund the grantees on an actual basis. If the amount comes in greater than expected, then that contingency goes to the grantees on a proportional basis.
Okay, I see. All right, thank you. That answers. Is there a motion? Yeah, it has been moved and seconded to approve the allocations of the Transit Guest Tax Committee. Is there further discussion? We have a person signed up to speak, Joseph Ledbetter.
Working with the computer, sorry. I don't have a problem with the way this is set up, but I have some questions why I have a problem with one item. On the historic preservation, is that currently being used? And secondly, who would you apply to? Is that something you apply to Visit Topeka for? Those are questions that I think are relevant. I have questions about the Riverfront Park as well, 106,000 allocation. We get answers on that or not?
Well, both of these were contained in an ordinance that was passed approximately when this sales tax was put in.
You mean
that
the
one
bed tax?
Well, yes, when this, I'm sorry, corrected, when this transit guest tax was enacted, that a certain amount is set aside for, it goes to the, it's 94,000, the railroad heritage. I think it's a total of 200,000, I believe, and that is apportioned out, 94,000 to railroad heritage, which is Great Overland Station. It was a specific amount of that goes to the Riverfront Park, which is on the north side of between Grand Overland Station and the river, and the remaining funds of that amount go to the Historic Preservation Fund, and the council has set up through the Transit Guest Tax Committee, a process by which agencies can apply for that funding.
Okay, thank you, you answered that. I actually did see the footnote about the Riverfront Park. Now, is that going to continue to be funded for a period of time, and who owns the Riverfront Park? Those are questions I'm curious about. Who maintains it? Is it signed?
Yeah, it is. It was transferred to the county when
Okay.
the city and county parks
So it has
were
been
merged.
transferred. Okay.
And the city's been transferring these funds to the county for that park.
That's all I had, thanks.
Are there other questions, comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the allocations from the Transit Guest Tax Committee are approved. Next item is the employment agreement, item E.
E is approval of an amendment to the employment agreement for City of Topeka Police Chief Ronald Miller.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to ask Mr. Sublette to provide a brief overview or summary. Thank you. Ask Mr. Sublette to provide a summary of the agreement.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Sublette?
Thank you. I'll try to talk louder this week. As we all know, the chief is moving on to be the U.S. Marshal for the state of Kansas, and we've been working on how this transition is going to occur. So this is an amendment to his current contract to deal with that transition separation. Just briefly, paragraph 1, that his employment with the city would end no later than August 29th, 2014. Paragraph 2, he would receive all of the vacation leave, holiday leave, a payment for that like any other employee would. But he's going to be allowed to use sick leave during the month of August 2014. That paragraph 3, that the city will reimburse the chief under COBRA for his insurance until he's eligible for health insurance and benefits in his new position or December 31st, 2014, whichever is earlier. And paragraph 4, which is a long paragraph, is essentially release of liability to all parties. So those are the essential changes to the contract. This will allow the city to move forward on working on a new chief and that process. And I believe that the chief and the city have both reviewed this, and the city manager has both reviewed this, and it needs to come to council for amendment.
Is there a comment from the council, Mr. Harmon?
May I make a motion? Thank you, Your Honor. I would move to approve the employment agreement amendment with Chief Ronald Miller.
Mr. Schmidt seconds. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
Ms. Ortiz and Mr. Schmidt. We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the employment agreement is approved. Yes, we do have cereal malt beverage
Yes.
applications. The clerk will read.
F is approval of retail cereal malt beverage and scrap metal dealers license applications. There are 3 cereal malt beverage license applications before you. One is Shortstop 3, located at 2044 Northwest Tyler Street. Second is Tilton's Oakland Market at 1905 Northeast Seward Avenue. And third is Woody's Express at 101 Northeast US Highway 24.
Thank you, council. What is your pleasure? Mrs. Ortiz moves to approve. Mrs. Schwartz seconds. Discussion. All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 10 yes.
And having voted yes, the applications are approved. For the announcements, we will ask the clerk to provide an overview of next week's agenda, or the next week's agenda.
June 17th agenda, there are, under the consent agenda, there are 6 board appointments and 5 noise exceptions. Noise exceptions for Lyndon Monroe, Kyle Moden, Fiesta Mexicana Parade, and Chris Martinez. Under the action items, there's an ordinance for J.G. Myers Jr. Trust, Thomas Meyer, and Anthony Meyer. There's a resolution for First Friday art events, complimentary alcohol. There's a resolution for Fiesta Mexicana's parking waiver, Fiesta Mexicana's special event, approving a special event. There's ordinance for expenditures for April 26th through May 30th, and that looks like it.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the other announcements. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just 2 comments very quickly. I'd like to thank everybody who participated in last evening's community input on the police chief search. It was I thought, a very good meeting, and enjoyed the opportunity to interact with people. And we've also received some information via online from other people. So it was a very good event. I enjoyed it. Secondly, just wanted to point out that next Monday, oh, is that yesterday? I'm sorry, I'm done. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I do note that we have a Boy Scout in attendance tonight, I'm sure here as part of your process of working on a badge, is that correct? You want to stand up, please, so we get to view the badges that you have, that you already, and tell us your troop and where it's located.
I am in Troop 7. I do not know exactly where it is located.
That's okay, that's not important. What's the organization that you work, that it's work with? Is it a school or a church?
His name?
And
It's the First Christian Church.
thank you. And your name is?
My name is Marcus Smith.
Thank you, Marcus, for being here. I hope you enjoyed our evening. And we'll have our council members make comment. We start first with Mr. Schmidt.
I don't really have any comment. I just wanted to say that German Fest on Saturday and Sunday was fantastic. Somebody with the last name of Schmidt. I
You
enjoy German food.
speak from experience.
I speak from experience. It was fantastic. The first Friday Art Walk was fantastic. And I also wanted to recognize the Topeka Rescue Mission and the project that they're undertaking and the wonderful start that they're already off to. It's just another example of a group in our community, and we have a ton of groups in this community that do wonderful, selfless work for the betterment of all of us, and I applaud them and encourage anybody who has spare million, 100,000, 500,000, whatever laying around. If you need to send it somewhere, that would be a great place, or $25 or $5 or whatever you can spare. But the Topeka Rescue Mission is doing some great work, and they've got some great plans for the future. Thank you.
Mr. Harmon, Mrs. Hiller.
Wanted to congratulate Bartlett and West for winning the prize on the Construction art competition recently. That was where a challenge went out for anybody who wanted to, I think, to create an art installation out of food items, and a great advance for Topeka. Otherwise, I hear wonderful reports. This first weekend in June is always my very favorite weekend in Kansas. And with the first Friday with the beginning of the Sunflower Music Festival, as well as the Mulvane Art Fair. And I missed it all this year, but for a good cause. And I'm happy to report that my eldest son is now happily married and through a very successful weekend.
Thank you. Councilman Brown.
I just wanted to thank all the citizens that came out last night to the public meeting and offered such thoughtful comments on the selection for the new chief. Thank you all.
Thank you. Mrs. Ortiz.
Well, Mr. Brown forgot the 88th Fiesta Mexicana. We're in District 2. We're having food sales right now, so go out and get your fix before the fix. That's for you, Justin. Also, I wanted to say that we've been having free movies in the park, and they've been very successful. Our next movie in the park will be at Garfield, and it's Monsters, Inc. It's exciting to see families bring their lawn chairs and blankets and come out and enjoy a free movie with free popcorn. So Saturday at 8:30, unless it rains. That's where we'll be.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just a reminder that we have our budget meeting coming up Saturday, June 14th, at 9 a.m., and it's at the Law Enforcement Center. So hopefully all of the council will be there, but the public is invited to attend and watch the proceedings, and I believe it will be televised. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Del Isla. Councilman Manspeaker. Councilwoman Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was a busy week for me. I spoke with the Women's Temperance Movement, and they have a citizenship test thing that I am going to share in my newsletter, and it was very interesting. I also want to mention that I spoke on behalf of the mayor at the Girls State, and that is phenomenal, the amount of young women that come to study the politics of our government. And in that process, I did use something that was from, and I'm not sure if Doug put it together or who put it together, but I want to pass this out because in light of the budget coming up this weekend, I used this document that somebody in finance, or we had it in our packet last week and we didn't go over it, but it actually says what the general fund breakdown is, which says 74% in public safety, infrastructure 9%, recreation and leisure 5%, courts and legal 5%, community development 2%, internal services 3%, and city governance 2%. So this was really a good document to use with the girls at Girls State, but I also think it's a good document to know exactly where our money is going. And finally, it's Father's Day this weekend, so I want to thank all the husbands, the fathers, the sons who gave us grandchildren, and our grandfathers for being fathers.
Thank you. And I would just follow up on what Councilmember Schmidt said. Several of us were there for the event last Friday evening where the Topeka Rescue Mission announced their $12 million project to greatly expand and provide new services. But the most significant point that was missed in some of the reports is that, well, they had 1 million already in, but in approximately the last month, they've had two $1 million gifts, anonymous gifts from individuals. So they have made 1/4 of their goal already, which is absolutely fantastic. And could not be of course, a better project, and we are certainly a better city because of the Topeka Rescue Mission. We have two persons signed up to speak. The first is Stephen Gurries.
Thank you, council members. I am Stephen Gurmis, and I was the one, along with my wife, who filed the tort claim. And following the water main break in the center of our driveway, my whole driveway sunk. It was repaired. A year later, it sunk again. It was bud-jacked. In the meantime, my house foundation developed several major cracks, of which I filled out in the form that I was requested to fill out. And my home inspection form showed that there were no major cracks, only minor cracks. And this happened in less than 2 years' time. I wasn't aware that this was coming up. I do not take the paper, the local paper, the Wichita Capital, Wichita Journal. I don't take that paper. I didn't know it was coming up, and I didn't realize this until yesterday. I had thought that I was going to be, I guess I was led to believe, maybe I was mistaken, that I would be informed of the action that was going to be taken. I was not. I was out of town the last week due to the storm. My phones have been out for a week, and I had the phone repaired late yesterday. And when I called to find out, I wasn't able to contact Mr. McCormick, and so I waited through the morning before I called the city clerk's office, and then I was given more information, and that's why I came to speak to you this evening. I was in hope that I'd be able to get you to at least table action on my claim until after you heard my report. One of the things I don't think you, or some people didn't understand, was when that main broke, the force of the water underground, not above ground, but underground, was so hard it pushed up to the house and was trapped in my French drain, which then went around my house, down the property line through my French drain and was flooding my neighbor's backyard. So to say that this was all the cause, the shift in my foundation, my windows, etc., was all the cause of normal shifting, I think is certainly not correct. And that's why I came to speak tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I apologize for the misunderstandings in communications. The second person signed to speak is Joseph Ledbetter.
Evening, council members. Joseph Ledbetter. I'm an attorney here in Topeka. First thing I want to do, I would like this photo back because I'm not ready to submit it as an exhibit yet. But just on a lighter note, this is an impervious surface growing a lot of grass and weeds in Topeka. I'd like to pass that around and get it back, please. This is one of my clients who has complained bitterly that he's being assessed for water runoff, stormwater runoff, and it now is growing quite a garden of weeds and grass, and is obviously anything but impervious. The second thing I want to talk about is I just, within the last week, got the 990s for Growth Organization of Topeka and the Chamber of Commerce, and this is what my comments were directed at earlier. The complete lack of transparency, in my opinion, the lack of oversight of JADO, of the economic development funds of this community. Just to give you a nutshell of what we put together, we found wages in the Chamber of Commerce, and because they're related, and Growth Organization Topeka is their subsidiary, and they have the same president, all of this is relevant. $1.3 million in wages at the Chamber, $509,000 in wages that go to Topeka. Now remember, the grant is $5 million a year. When we include Mr. Kinziger's salary of $406,000 a year now, this is all as of 2013, we have total wages of $2,224,000, so $2.2 million. We have a reimbursement given back to the Chamber from Growth Organization of Topeka for $814,000, which we were told in the 2012 minutes that was actually reimbursing and paying for Chamber wages, Chamber salaries, according to the chairman of Go Topeka. I clearly remember those statements, and they are on the minutes of JADO. What's interesting is that when you look at the Chamber of Commerce total dues, money they would take in without Go Topeka, it's $740,000. Now that would include all of their overhead, all of their rent, all their utilities, all their marketing, their phones, all their staff. Obviously, it is woefully short. And it's my contention that without Go Topeka, the Chamber cannot pay all these salaries, and therein is a huge problem. We have $2.2 million in wages being consumed out of a $5 million grant per year, and we have no scrutiny, in my opinion, of what's going on by JADO. And all I have to do is look at the record, and I see no discussion of these very poignant points that I'm making, because I've made them repeatedly at the JADO meetings and at other meetings, saying this has got to be rectified, and it has not been. So I still stand on my premise that until we have complete transparency of these funds, nobody should vote for an extension on that sales tax until we have complete accountability and benchmarks of where this money's going and what it is accomplishing, and with public scrutiny so we can ask the questions at JADO meetings. We should not vote for that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Seeing no further business, the meeting is adjourned.
Jenny, scan you these. The notes.